we couldn't find a match. There was no one out there that matched me. My mixed race heritage is the reason why it's so hard to find a match. It's not that, oh, it's just, if you're Asian, it's harder to get a match. No, it's just that there are less Asians on the registry. Then you take mixed race people, and there's like no one on the registry.
Yeah, so what we're doing is essentially it's a feature-length documentary we're trying to put together. Right now we're kind of in the middle of filming, so we're just trying to create more funding opportunities to try and get the film going. So we're kind of doing like a fundraising campaign right now to get that going. So we're doing it through a program called Indiegogo, and it's sort of a fundraising platform where people can contribute funds to help finish the film, but at the same time they receive perks or incentives for doing so. So we're kind of pre-selling the DVDs, we've got soundtracks, people can get their name in the credits. In exchange for kind of helping with funding the film, we're able to kind of then sort of use that funding to finish the film, because obviously film takes time and money. So we've been trying to meet with a lot of different subjects and people that we're sort of following, and they live all over North America, so like Toronto or Vancouver, or actually down in Los Angeles. So it's a lot of traveling around and trying to capture all their stories. So it's could be quite the journey, because like I said, we have a lot of people we're following who are still patients, who are searching for bone marrow donors. We have some patients who have found donors, and now they are kind of basically, it's post-transplant, so they're talking about that process that comes after they find their match. But essentially, if you're mixed, multi-ethnic, they often compare it to finding a needle in a haystack. So it's like 1 in a million chance of finding a match, because obviously if I'm part Japanese, part Caucasian, normally a similar match would have to be found, so someone who's also probably mixed Japanese and Caucasian. That's not always 100% the case, but it's a better chance that you will have a better match if obviously your genetics are similar to someone else's. Now you can find sort of mixed matched kind of scenarios where they rank them on a scale of 8 to, or basically 1 to 10. And you want to find a 10 out of 10, obviously, because that's a perfect match. But sometimes you will find an 8 out of 10 or a 9 out of 10 match. And those will work, but there's a higher sort of chance of getting graft versus host disease. And you don't want that, because that's when the bone marrow starts to reject. And sometimes if it rejects too much, you have to find another match. And in instances where you're mixed, it's harder to find a match, because obviously it gets complex. So you don't want that to happen, because it took probably for a lot of people, it's harder to actually have found that match, right, initially. So we kind of look at that aspect, and we're trying to sort of say, you know, as society, as we're blending and as we're mixing, you know, how is it that, you know, what are some of these complexities that will arise in regards to race and medicine, right? Which is kind of a controversial topic in itself, right? So we're looking at all those angles of especially Vancouver and Toronto and some of the other centers in the US, where we have such a high sort of Asian population mixing with the Caucasian population. It's becoming more and more of a blended sort of society. And we're finding that too, is mixed people in the US and in Canada, we're one of the fastest growing demographics, right? So these are some of the issues and complications that we're going to have to start addressing, you know, as we become more blended. And essentially, when you think about it, it really has to do with the fact that nowadays there's a lot more children being born of multi-ethnic backgrounds. And so what happens with that is that of my generation, there's not very many of us, because it was less common for there to be intermarriage. If you look at the Japanese Canadian community, you know, where we have a 95% intermarriage rate, right? If you think about it, all the children now being born are likely of 2 different like ethnic backgrounds, Japanese and something else. Or now, like some of my cousins, you might have 8 different ethnic combinations or different sort of groups, and it's hard to keep track of it all. So what's happening as the Japanese Canadian community is blending, you know, this is something that is very relevant, and a lot of our patients that we're following in the film are actually of Japanese descent, so they are mixed Japanese. So if you look at it, it is kind of will become a problem if there is the supply and demand isn't there, right? So what this film is trying to accomplish is to try and raise awareness for people of my generation to join the bone marrow registries, like One Match Canada, Or at the same time of my generation, if we have children, soon in Canada we're going to have what's called the cord blood bank. So you'll be able to bank your umbilical cords, and that stem cells in those umbilical cords can also help save lives with transplanting. But that will come into play, and I think in about a year's time. So if that does arise, people will have the choice to donate their stem cells, the cord blood, to these banks so anyone can use it. And so it's basically trying to get the word out and let people know, educate people.
They call them complex partial seizures. She just stares off to one direction, and then it's usually pretty quick. We're supposed to wait like 5 minutes before we give her some med that'll break it, but we can't wait. We don't wait. We're just like, no, stop.
She did find a match through Hawaii, and the donor there is going to be meeting her for the first time tomorrow.
The one thing that went through my mind when they told me that she was a 5-year-old, how can I not help this child?
So basically, for me, this is something I had no idea about, right? I had no idea that it was more difficult for people of mixed heritage to find bone marrow donors if they had rare blood diseases like leukemia. So it was about 2007-8. A friend of mine who was a cancer survivor said to me, he's like, Jeff, you're mixed, you're part Japanese. There is a young gentleman in Vancouver who is looking for a bone marrow donor. You could be his match, right? And I said, well, why would I be his match? I don't get it. And that's when I kind of learned that it has to do with ethnicity, right? And it has to do with the fact that people of the same ethnic blend are a better chance of being a match. And at the time, I was really busy and I didn't know anything about it. And I had, luckily, no one I know is affected by cancers. And so I didn't end up signing up to the bone marrow registry, partly because I had no idea how to do it. And I didn't really understand what it was all about. And I think this is the same reason a lot of people don't join the bone marrow registry. There's a lot of misconceptions. One of the misconceptions is they still kind of extract bone marrow from you, and it's painful. Well, it's not so much that anymore. Right now, 70% of the time is blood transfusion. So they pull blood out of you and they bring it back into you. They just pull the stem cells from it. And it's like a 4-hour process. And you can save someone's life. So those misconceptions that I had are what kind of made me hesitant to join the registry. And I didn't. And so it wasn't until about a year ago when someone approached me. Her name is Athena Asclepiadis. And she's part Japanese, running a organization in the US called Mixed Marrow. And she goes around and tries to recruit multi-ethnic people to join the registry to help her multi-ethnic patients. So she explained to me more about the process, what it's all about. And the more I kind of listened to it, the more I realized, yeah, we do need to create more of an awareness for it, because I myself had no idea about this. And I knew that most people I talked to, and everyone on the street I talked to, they have no idea that this is the case, right? So really what motivates us now to go out and make this documentary is really to share these stories of these patients who are looking for donors and who are really hoping that people watching this film are going to feel compelled to go out and join the registries. So like I said, we still have probably a year of shooting left to capture these stories, but at the same time, for me, I'm learning more and more and more every day. When you talk to the specialists, the doctors, the patients, you start to realize this is really a complex area of medicine. And for a lot of people, it's not going to make sense. But we do know that the people who are searching for matches need to find their matches. And there just isn't as many people on the registry. I think in Canada, a little under 2,000 people identify as being multi-ethnic on the bone marrow registry out of the 300,000 that are on the registry. So that represents like a 0.05% of the registry identifies as being multi-ethnic in a society that is slowly becoming one of the fastest growing demographics. So we just need more people on that registry. We held a drive at a local Vancouver event called Happapalooza. And for those of you who remember Happapalooza in Vancouver, it was a celebration of multi-ethnic arts and culture. So one of the things that was really important was that we had Athena come up from LA, work with One Match Canada, and at Happapalooza, we actually held a drive where people signed up and you could sort of join the registry. And at that registry, I signed up to become a registered donor. So, at some point in your life, you may never get the call to register, but you might, right? And that's when you can decide that you could save a life, right? And I think for a lot of people Who wouldn't want to help someone in need like that? And it's really, like I said, an easy process with the blood transfusions, and you know, it's really not painful at all, right? So, but it's one of those sort of things that, you know, we need to get people aware of, because you have to actually sign up to the registry. It's not like an organ donor thing where you can check the box. It's you actually have to sign up, and you know, it's really simple. You take 2 little Q-tips and you swab the inside of your cheek, and that's all. It takes less than 5 minutes to register. And then you can go to onematch.ca and you can order kits or ask for a kit, and then they send it to you and you sort of fill the form out, take your cotton swabs, and it's that easy. Or you can go to drives. I believe there's a drive at Metrotown coming up May. It's a Saturday, one of the second weekend of May, I think. It's called Thanks Mom. You can check it out online. It's actually specifically it is targeting minority ethnic groups. So it's targeting the Chinese, the Japanese, the South Asians, and they're specifically going after those groups because there's not as many. There's 85% Caucasian people on the registries, which means that there's a very small percentage of all the other ethnic groups on the registries. And a lot of it has to do with certain cultures don't believe in sort of giving of themselves through stem cells or through bone marrow. But I think those perceptions need to start to shift, because there are people who need their help, right? And it's really an easy way to help save a life.